there it's going. Okay. All right. Today, first let me tell you kind of where we got to in our path so far. And we started with this idea about telling the epic story, right? The idea of God making creation, the angels, and all this that builds up to the rebellions from the angels, and then we get finally to the Garden of Eden, which in our story we call this Act 3. So Act 1 is the once upon a time, it's the time before all times. And Act 2 is the entrance of evil, like when stuff went wrong. Act 3 is where we live today. And what we like to say is that the whole story we get from the Bible is a love story that's set in the midst of a war story. But Act 3 is a war story. And I want to point something out that might not have been obvious to you, is that spiritual warfare and the kingdom of God against the kingdom of evil, this isn't like a theme of the Bible. It is literally the entire context from like page 2 to like page like -1, right? Like everything in there from the fall of mankind to the restoration of the kingdom in Revelation 20, it's all warfare. So it's a mistake to think of this as one theme among many or a thought once upon a time. Like this is literally the entire context of our entire Bible, page 1 to the end, page 2 to the end. And so what we want to talk about is like when we talk about where we are in this progress of history, it's really important to know what story you're in, or so many things won't make sense. And I'm going to go through what a bunch of this means. In the Bible, you have not only that God is making war against the enemy, but I will make a couple points that he does, is that repeatedly throughout the Old Testament, we see God referred to as a warrior. As soon as the Israelites cross the Red Sea when they're getting fled from Egypt, the first response of the Israelites is like, the Lord is a warrior, the Lord is his name, because they saw this as God going to war against all of the Egyptian gods and the Egyptian army and whooping trash on all of them. They saw this as an aggressive act of war against their enemies. But that's just one example. It's super obvious. The whole story of coming into the promised land, about fighting against the Anakim, against the flood, it is constantly God the Father at war. It would be also a very common mistake in the church to think that Jesus, however, is different, that Jesus is not a warrior. But that is not at all the case. But what happens is we can really easily selectively read Jesus with the lamb on his shoulders and the kids on his lap, and he's just such a nice guy. And we forget all the times that he's out there kicking somebody's ass. So when he's out there with the synagogue and he's out there with the Pharisees, he picks fights, right? So like over here on one Sunday, I'm going to heal someone's hand, and the Pharisees freak out. Next week, he doesn't go in there thinking about church unity and how can I kind of settle down the things. He's like, hey, all you Pharisees, remember how I pissed you off last week? Watch me do it again. Watch me rub this in your face in the middle of all the people who now really are mad at you. It is constantly a question of warfare. And I would point that even though he came as a servant in the first coming, the second coming, he comes with his robe dipped in blood, with his sword in his hand and in his mouth. And it's to finish what he started. The first incarnation is, I'm going to give everyone a chance to get out of what's coming the second time. It is his escape plan from the inevitable war that Jesus Christ is going to war. And I would add another thought to this. You might also have heard people say, well, sure, like Jesus is going to do warfare, but that's not our job. We don't have any role in this because Satan's the toothless lion, and Jesus fights all our enemies. But that is also not the Bible. Constantly, the Bible says, no, you pick up your sword, pick up your battle. And in fact, here's Psalm 139. This is verse 5. Let the godly thus celebrate the triumphal glory, and let them shout for joy on their beds. Let the exaltation of God be in their mouths, and a double-edged sword in their hands, inflicting vengeance on the nations, punishment on the peoples, binding their kings with chains and their dignitaries with iron shackles, carrying out the judgment decreed against them, the nations. This honor is for all of his godly people. Hallelujah. That's Psalm 149. We are all part of this. Nobody gets to sit it out. But what you can do, and what a lot of people do, is they ignore it. They ignore it like this isn't part of their story, because what happens if we don't have a warfare mindset is we come into either indulging or arranging. These are the things that we wind up falling into, because warfare and winning, actually taking something captive, isn't part of our story. So I want to talk about this going on today. In a book called Iron John, John Bly says, the early death of a man's warrior keeps the boy in him from growing up. Now, this idea, of course, is not simply gender specific. It's this notion that when we live in a culture that says that every single act of aggression is bad, then it loses a part of us that God made us to be. If we are made in the image of God, and God is a warrior, he's not only a warrior, but certainly that's part of him, then we too bear that image. And it is a part of us that needs to be trained, that needs to be matured, that needs to be grown up, so that we can live fully in the life that God has for us. If you remember, one of our big threads is from St. Irenaeus. The glory of God is a man fully alive. This is part of being fully alive. And there's also this notion that we must have a mission in our life. Unless we are part of something bigger than ourselves, then ultimately we will arrange for our own small stories, and we'll think that life is boring and dull. We'll eventually run out of the small stories that we write for ourselves. And if part of God's bigger story that he's inviting us into is this warfare, is this kingdom of God against the kingdom of darkness, that too is a bigger story that can be worth all of your energy and time. You really do have that image, because God made us as allies. I want you to remember what happens just prior to the Garden of Eden. Is we have Satan's fall, we have the rebellion in heaven, at least one, and we have Satan is now on earth. God puts Adam and Eve there in the midst of his enemies, not as victims, but to be allies in a war that already started, that went way before us. We were born into this sense as allies. And I'd point out, he doesn't tell Adam, by the way, guys, on Thursday, there's going to be this guy in the garden. There's going to be this snake. It's not really a snake. By the way, Adam, bring your sword. He doesn't have to go through that, simply because he trusts Adam and Eve's character, that they know what to do. Now, needless to say, they don't. But I don't think that we should consume that they were just idiots. I think that there probably was a reason that God trusted them in that moment and thought that they had at least the character and the opportunity to handle it differently. Probably from experience, probably because that's how they were made. We have reason to believe that he didn't just dump his 5-year-old in a room full of loaded weapons, or with a poisonous snake that's going to eat them. This is our original glory. And our original glory predates and is deeper than our original sin. And yet so often we lose that piece today, because what happens at the fall, the worst part of the fall isn't our sin. The worst part of the fall isn't the entropy of the universe. The worst part of the fall is that we got used to it, is that we've given up everything else. And we thought that death and mayhem and stuff, well, that's just the world. That's just the way it is. And what can I do about it? If I can just get myself a little bit of money, if I get myself a little bit of security, if I can just get away from all the crap of the world, at least I'll take care of me and mine. And so it is our so much of our time and energy, and by our, I mean the whole humanity, is just trying to arrange for a little bit of comfort away from all of the misery in this world. Now, see, the enemy, on the other hand, will try to convince you that your role in all of this is totally insignificant. The enemy wants to shut you down at every level to make sure that you don't think there's anything dangerous going on in your life, that there's nothing worth doing, that there's nothing worth fighting for, and that even if there is, it's for other people, not you. The enemy wants to take all of that down. We have this whole list of words that we call the D words. It's diminishment, it's disqualification, it's desire. It's all of these things that take away the glory and the purpose and the energy that God has for you, and turns it simply into waiting it out until Jesus comes back. Hopefully I won't suffer too much in the meantime. Now, a thing about warriors is different from just kind of squatters, is that warriors, also compared to soldiers, warriors have vision. Warriors know what they're fighting for. The guys in 300, if you remember this story, and I don't know if you know this, the story of Thermopylae is a real story. Yes, they made it all sexy and hot, but this is a real story. Literally 300 Spartans fought against 1 million Persians. This was one of the major turning points of Western civilization. But what they had is they had vision, they had purpose. And in the movie, you'll see like they went against all of the political, social, all of the other norms of people who just didn't have any vision. They thought the Persians weren't that big a deal, or what are we going to do? We should give up anyway. Like most of their context was like, this was a losing battle. The least you can do is try to make peace. But the Spartans had vision, and they fought for something that was bigger than themselves. And it made victory for everybody. Like literally you and I speak and think the way we do, partly because of that battle in real history. And so a warrior has to have a cause greater than simply self-preservation. Without vision, we just fall into that, like I said, just to arranging and indulging, and you can't do that. And yet, I would point out that all of the spiritual weapons that God gives us, not to mention all the earthly weapons and the mental weapons, these weapons are still given without regret from God, which means that they're real. You have been given opportunity and power. You've been given spiritual weapons, like Paul says, and they are real whether you use them for the kingdom of God or not. Whether you are reckless, whether you are thoughtless, whether they just rust in your cabinet, these weapons are still real. Now, if you contrast, there's a word in Japanese called the ronin. And a ronin is a samurai who doesn't have a master. And everyone knew the samurais. These were the best warriors. They had the weapons, they had the skills, they had the armor. They had, like, these guys were there like Navy SEALs. They were awesome. Everyone respected them. They had incredible authority throughout the land. But they served a king or the emperor. They served somebody. Samurai by themselves weren't like lords in a sense. But a samurai without a leader, someone whose lord had been killed, for example, was called a ronin. And they were terrifying because they still had all the skill. They still had all the armor. They still had, no one's going to mess with the ronin. But they had turned from like a symbol of integrity and grace and like the core of the strength of Japanese culture into something incredibly dangerous and threatening. And this is what happens when we can pick up this idea of being a warrior without having God as our master. And you all know these people. Every one of you has run into a bully. Every one of you has run into a thug. God forbid none of you are that person. But there are people who bring up this notion like, you're right, I'm strong, I'm a warrior, I can do this, but they take it up for themselves. And then they become very dangerous in our culture. And that's why you see this happens all the time in humanity, but it happens in the church too, is what we call friendly fire. Is you have people who they might have great capacity to lead, but they squash everyone along the way. I was just talking to one of the major churches, no need to drop names here, but one of the major churches you'd have heard of in the past 20 years. They got enormous and big in the Midwest. But eventually what happened is that the leader of that church, very charismatic, very powerful, was also totally careless about the people around him. And when that church finally fell apart, it was one of those like deck of cards things where now you have dozens, if not hundreds of people saying like, that guy totally ruined my life. He messed up my family. He did whatever else. And in this case, it was like he was not held to any kind of accountability or any bigger picture. And I don't think that he was a bad person. I think he was trying to serve God, but ultimately he wasn't submitted to a vision that was towards integrity. It was a vision towards just power. That's the kind of fire, the friendly fire, that we have to be careful of. I would also point out that a warrior compared to a soldier is cunning. A warrior thinks and has wisdom about what's going on. What battles are yours to fight? Because it's not all of them. Like not everything that comes against you in your kingdom is actually yours to mess with. Not every battle that shows up on your doorstep is actually your problem. In fact, this is one of the places that the enemy will try to string you out, is to get you fighting battles that aren't yours, that you don't have authority and favor in, that you don't have the opportunity to actually make a difference. He will string you out. And so you have to learn also to be shrewd and cunning in the way that you fight spiritual warfare. And this is all about humility and wisdom. And usually it's about refusing to rush. Going back to samurais for a second, there are lots of famous samurai stories about samurais who come up against each other for a duel, but never actually fight. And so one of my favorites is, I can't remember the cat's name. He's sort of like the most famous samurai of the day. And it's like a gunslinger, like other kind of up and coming youngsters want to fight him all the time. And so they just come to his house and pick a fight. And so they would get outside and they'd take their stance. The other guy would take another stance. The other guy would take another stance. And they're positioning themselves like pieces on a chessboard. And then the story goes on how eventually the great warrior eventually says, he takes his final stance and realizes, I just beat you. Like it's over. Like we didn't actually touch swords, but my spirit, my awareness, like I just kicked your ass. And if you want me to follow through and cut your head off, I'll do that. But that's not necessary. The other guy says, yeah, you're right. And he leaves. And so there's this notion of being cunning and aware that they don't want to make aware of this. Okay. This is where I'm going to talk about, this is the context that we want to mention. And to be clear, like in boot camp sessions, we've done spiritual warfare probably 9 different ways because there's a lot of topics in it. There's a lot of pieces to it. It is the kind of thing that is a lifetime worth of study if you're into it. Now, on the other hand, you can get really over it, like too much into it. And this becomes your focus in life, and it's unlikely that that's your call. But I do want to go through a couple things that are very tactical and kind of like spiritual warfare 101. The 3 main enemies that we see in the Bible to us are what we call the flesh, the enemy, the devil, and the world. And so those things are brought out as kind of like an unholy trinity of the things that confront us throughout our lives. Let me start to help identify some of these things, as well as how they often work, to give you a place to start with this. The flesh is what Paul particularly talks about as like the old man, the spirit, or the old flesh. The NIV talks about it as your carnal nature. It's this part of, frankly, it's our flesh, but it's also more than that. The way you identify the flesh is that your flesh is the immature, I want everything now, all I want to do is comfort. It's just the little weasel in your life that kind of is immature, and it just demands its own way now in all the things. It wants everything to be promised and safe. It hates risk. It hates anything that's not like on paper and delivered on time. Like it wants it now and it wants it its way. That's the flesh. It'll also be the thing in you that wants the easy way out. Like, well, maybe this would get me, maybe this would be great for the kingdom, but it's going to cost me money that I really would rather spend on my vacation. So it's not my thing. It always wants the easy way out. But the thing you got to know about your flesh is what Paul says in those same verses, is your flesh isn't you. Your flesh isn't actually nearly the deepest part of you. It's a shame when Christians get in a place where their flesh is driving the car, because it kind of is the car. And so if you imagine your spirit and your soul being the drivers, so to speak, and your body is just the car that's driving you, it's your meat bag that's running around this world, you can't let it drive itself, because it just aims for the ditch. It will just always aim for, like, it's going to aim for the easy out, for the soft money, for everything else, because that's the way it is. It's lazy, it's like impetuous, and it's immature. So you don't let your flesh drive you, but it starts with knowing that it isn't you. That's not who you are. So when Paul says, who will rescue me from this body of death? He's talking about who's going to rescue me from myself. But there's a huge moment, and there's like, because that's not really who's in charge. And it's Christ who rescues me from this body of death. So here's from Romans 7. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. Which is to say, my soul, my spirit decides to do good, but my flesh does something opposite. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in action. Something has gone wrong deep within me, and it gets the better of me every time. I truly, truly delight in God's commands, but it's pretty obvious that not all of me joins in that delight. Parts of me covertly rebel, and just when I least expect it, they take charge. And I am not really the one doing it, but it is the sin within me that is doing it. So when I say like your flesh is not you, keep in mind that so often we have to understand our sin is also not us. It's just this thing that kind of lingers on. It's part of that yes, but not yet piece of our lives. My sin is not me, and that gives you the notion that you are not a slave to this thing, that you have authority, you have power, you have the ability to overcome, but it takes work. Here's a thought also that happens a lot in Christian circles is we say things like, you have authority, you're no longer a slave to sin. And it sounds great, but the moment it doesn't work out that way, we think it doesn't, we're like, well, that must have been a lie, or I'm totally screwing this up. And I would point out to anyone who thinks like that, like, it's called warfare for a reason, right? Like there is a struggle, it takes work, and there's successes, there's failures, there's gives and there's takes. The thing that wins every spiritual battle is endurance. It's not about waving your wand and ta-da, I beat the demons. And we can go into that later. It is about endurance. And it's about trying and knowing that That the majesty is not that I am Goliath and I should, and now that I've been given Christ's authority, I can go whoop trash on all the spiritual entities. Remember, you are still David. And what's fascinating is that you have any power at all. And that through God's power, that's magnified and registered so that the little tiny guy with a rock beats the giants. That's the metric that we're working from. And so the fact that we are in this battle at all is incredible. And you live in that and you leverage what God gives you. We don't think that it's a gimme. Does that make sense? So we are not simply sinners saved by grace. That's not it. There is a distinction between our hearts and our flesh that is totally critical. Because when God says you must guard the heart because it's the wellspring of life, he is making this distinction that there is a part of you that is core, that is central, that is not your flesh, that is not the sinful man, that is not the old creature, which means that you can win this fight. And I would say the one thing that is like if I give you one lesson about how to defeat the flesh, is that you are ruthless. The ruthless hanging of the traitor that is inside your own gates. That's how you win this battle. It's the little tiny things. It's whatever the thing is. It's when you feel your flesh drawn towards alcohol, pornography, lust, sinning, gossip. You pick it. The moment you see that traitor rise up, you cut its head off like mercilessly, because it's the moment that you indulge that thing that it gets stronger. You probably have all heard this old story about the Indians and the wolves and the two wolves at war within me. It's become a very popular story. Ethan's giving me a look like he's never heard it. Well, that's just tragic. But I'll tell you the story. So this old story about of the young man who goes to the old wise man to say like I feel like there's two pieces of me at war. And the story is like there's a white wolf who wants goodness and truth and purity, and there's a black wolf who only wants destruction and avarice. And I don't know who's going to win. And the old man says, whoever wins is whoever you feed. Whoever you feed, whatever part of you that you give into, that you feed, that you indulge, that's the piece that wins. That's the piece of the flesh. And that's how you win that battle, is you never indulge that traitor. And you shut it off the moment you see it. That takes work, it takes perseverance. And the truth is that in that moment, I don't want to kill the traitor. Like, I want that drink. I want to send that email, right? I want to look at that website. I don't want to hang the traitor because right now that feels kind of good. Probably because I'm tired, probably because I'm hurt, probably because I just want a little bit of comfort. But I would say that's how that battle loses. So I'd also point out that's how your flesh will always sabotage your greater life. Your flesh will always try to undermine the things of God that you know are better for you, but it's a saboteur, it's its nature. So those little examples of sabotage are, it's taking the bribe, it's refusing to confront the wrong that you know is right in front of you. It's the bully, it's the lie, whatever else. It's accepting flattery from people who that they have an ulterior motive. It's all of those things. And understand that with the flesh, this is a struggle for your strength. Who's going to drive the car is a question of where does the car go? And does the car go into the ditch and where it's off the battlefield, which is where an enemy would love you, is disengaged and unable to contribute? Or is it in the fight? Are you on the line with Rohan and all of the shield maidens? Are you there? Because that's the place that the flesh really works, is are you present in this fight or are you taken out? And so the real thing, what God wants from us, is that we have to just show up. We just have to show up on that battlefield. And sometimes that's all it is. There's maybe nothing to do but to appear. I will tell you that's better than most people find that they're able to do. But as you go into as we go into this, and especially as we start talking about what does it mean for us to be the kings and queens of this industry? What does it mean for us to bring the weight of our lives to the world? This is where it comes down. Will you bring the weight of who you are and the glory that God put in your life? Will you bring that to the world? Let it show up and let them deal with it. Or are you going to worry about what they think about you? Are you going to worry about, God forbid, you should hurt someone's feelings? Are you going to be you? The other enemy that we talk about is the world. This one's kind of hard to get your head around because it's the hardest thing to see. It's been said it's sort of like a fish trying to understand the bowl that it lives in. Let me give you an example from a different world to show you a little bit about this goes. Thomas Cahill talks about a story that when you get to Jesus's time, the world is in a weird place. I mean, it's always a weird place, but let me show you the weirdness of this one. You'll remember that circumcision is not a symbol of the covenant. It literally is the covenant. This is the thing that says like you're a Jew or not. And it's very like plain to see for anyone who has opportunities to look. Now in Greek culture and Hellenistic culture, there was a whole lot of naked, right? It was bathhouses, it was gymnasiums. There was a lot of opportunities for men to be around other men who are naked all the time. And if you are, and that's sort of like the golf course of the day. If you're doing business, you're at the spa, and that means that you're naked with all your buddies. And that means that if you're a Jew, everyone knows, like you can't hide that. But there were a lot of people in that day, especially who wanted to find their way up the path in a sort of in social circles, that they had a surgery. This is some of the earliest cosmetic surgery called an epispasm, where they would take the foreskin from a cadaver and sew it back onto you. Because if you were born a Jew, you were circumcised 8 days old. But now, oh my gosh, I'm trying to make my way. And so they're going to sew on a cadaver's foreskin because at least it hopefully would trick people. Now, I don't know how the ladies in that room feel. Like that makes me quiver in a way that I can't put my words to. The wrongness of that and just the fear of it is terrifying. And I think, what stupid idiot would even think about that? But what they were thinking about is that the world of their time made that make sense. It made something that should be ridiculous to us make perfect sense to them. Well, that's what you do. And I can show you how to find someone who can do this. You know, I got a great doctor over here who will do it for cheap. You can get a cheap epispasm if you only need it to last for a day because the flesh isn't fresh. I mean, you can imagine the whole culture that goes around this. It's disgusting and wretched. And yet what were they thinking is what the world told them. And so for us, and for any time, the world is the thing that you're not allowed to ask about, that it would never cross your mind. Like, why is that weird? Like, well, of course this, of course that, of course. And you know, honestly, like I could put things in these slots, but I'll let you fill it into yourself. What is sort of obvious that from God's word, like this would never fly in God's word, but yet we just assume it and we celebrate it and we pick it up because that's what the world tells us. You take any group of posers and you put them into a group and all of a sudden they're the world. They're all making stuff up and they all just don't want to be cut out. The power of the world is inclusion, is I want to be on the in group. And so maybe in middle school, you had some kid in your peer group who always said that they had sex way before anyone else. And they were like this secret fount of information of like, they would tell you like, well, this is what it's like to kiss, this is what it's like to masturbate, whatever it is. They had this, they were the first person that you heard of who had all this sex knowledge. And then sometime pretty later, like they had no idea what they were talking about. They were absolute idiots. They made it all up. That is the world. That is the story of the world because it is a carnival of counterfeits. It's a carnival of fakes that often appears to be actually holy. And so the church has its own world cultures, its own counterfeits. If you remember Pilgrim's Progress and Vanity Fair, it's this world of things that look almost like the city of God. And it's right on the fringe of God's city. And what it says is like so many people got to that point and they felt pretty good there. They felt safe. They understood what was going on. They got the rules and they felt so safe that they failed to finish the journey. So the world is that thing that we have to be aware of because it sells us out. And so the question is like, where do you get your sense of power and importance from? Where do you get your sense of inclusion from? And if it doesn't come from God, then it most likely is coming from the world. But instead, if you can learn to start drawing your strength and your truth and your pictures, like really make it your point to get that information from God, that's how you dismiss the fog that is the world. Because ultimately that's the thing, is like, it's a fog, it's a lie, it's a cheat that's just trying to get you distracted from everything else. And I would point out here a verse that really fits here is where Paul's talking to Timothy, like any warrior who's in service doesn't get himself entangled in the affairs of the world because he's got a job to do. We're back to the warrior thing. Warriors who get tied up in other things that aren't the kingdom, they're off mission. They're off mission, and yet all those things. And so you've probably seen war movies like this. The soldier who gets into Normandy, France, and he's tired. He's tired and he's been beat up, he's been shot at, and he's just trying to survive. And wouldn't it be nice to just to sit in this farmhouse for a little bit, maybe get a little leg, maybe get a bar of chocolate, but wouldn't it be nice to not be at war? Like, it's totally understandable. It's not that it's evil, but it does take you off mission and off the battlefield. And you have to see it for what it is. That's not saying we never rest, it's saying you don't get entangled in that stuff from the world. Which brings us to the third enemy that I want to talk about, and that's the devil. The funny thing about the devil is how often people think that it's a joke or a metaphor or an idea. When C.S. Lewis was becoming a Christian, he says that he was just shocked at how often Jesus talks about the devil as if he's a real person. And he's like, what? Like, I would expect Jesus to be wise and stuff, but he's like, what a fool. He's just superstitious. Even Jesus is superstitious. Well, that's an interesting observation, isn't it? Like, is Jesus talking about demons and devils in a way that no longer applies to us? So let me point out, like, it seemed that when Jesus was walking around, like, he was tripping over demons everywhere he went. Like, you couldn't hardly go 2 blocks without somebody's possessed, somebody's oppressed, somebody's like, it happens all the time everywhere. And he's in like a 30-mile square area. And there's certainly some dozens, if not hundreds, and I don't know how many, but it's more than one. And that's just in his space. So let me ask you this question. Are there more demons now or less, the same, in our world? Are they this, like, what's the story? Have they all been killed somehow? Mm-hmm. Spirits are eternal. Spirits never die. And so if we just assume, and I say this assume not in a weird way, but like, we don't know a lot about them, but if we assume that they don't reproduce, but also that they don't die, then at least as many demons as Jesus saw are probably all around us. So I'm not the guy who says there's a demon under every rock. Like, that would be bad, but under some rocks. And so you ask yourself this question: have you ever looked at a situation in your life, a moment, and is this a category for you? Like, that could literally be demonic. That could literally be a spirit that is influencing this, that is attacking me. Like, is this a category for your life? And knowing that there's not just the devil, there's a third of the heavenly host. That's a lot. In fact, what Daniel says is that when he saw the angels, there were 10,000s upon 10,000s. He's talking into the multiple millions, at least, if you just take him literally, and he's probably not telling you the whole story. And so let's say there's just 3 million fallen angels on the earth. Like, that's a big ass number. And so there's a good chance on the bus in Seattle, on the train, on the airplane, there's a good chance that you have run into these creatures, but have you ever noticed? And if so, what do you do about it? So this notion about we have to have a category that this is part of our story, or we will lose it. Now, Neil, anyone else who's kind of gone overseas, this is something that most missionaries will tell you, is that outside of the like enlightened Western world, demons are everywhere. Like, and the people who live there, like, this is their daily life, and they know it, and they look at Westerners like, what are you, stupid? They look at us who the Enlightenment has robbed us of the spiritual worldview, so we are blind very often to a very real thing. And what that has done for us is, like, when I think of my world, it's like there's really only 2 players on the stage. There's me and there's God. And I eliminate the enemy. Then when something goes wrong, who do I blame? Because usually it's that I'm going to either blame myself, I'm a screw up, I messed up, I did something wrong, or I blame God, or somewhere in the middle. And in the meantime, Satan is just over there saying, did you hear what he said about your mother? Like, think about the enemy as this thing that always wants to stir the pot. And if you ever considered the thoughts that come to us, the impressions, the feelings, just that maybe it's that shiver in the middle of the night, that's not you. Watch your thoughts for any time that you notice you're referred to in the third person. So it's not like I'm a bad person, it's you're a bad person. Now, why would I say that to myself? It's not I'm not smart enough, it's you're not smart enough. How often is the enemy stirring the pot in your lives? And I'd point out, just to kind of draw the point home, there is another really dumb idea that goes around Christian circles that Christians can't be demonized. And there's no biblical reason to believe this. So, and here's just a couple of verses to kind of lock you in. When Ananias and Sapphira go before Peter and they lie about selling the property and they're struck dead by God, it's really clear that A, they've been good Christians, that they've known these people for a long time, and B, that it was the devil who incited them to do that. It's super clear. There's no question about it. And that's just one story. You also hear Peter making his point, like, all of the Christians around the world are under this persecution from the devil. You're no different. He's talking specifically to Christians. And what he says is like, the devil is out there like a roaring lion who wants to maul you, who's looking for a chance to devour. So he's not just a guy in tights and a pitchfork who wants to kind of make you, wants to make you steal the bubble gum. Like, his goal is to eat you, to take you off the battlefield and to devour everything that you are, all of your strength, all of your purpose, to destroy your spirit. That's his goal. And that's why we have to be careful that we don't think that this is just a game. But I would point out that while Paul says we don't fight against flesh and blood, that this is spiritual war, absolutely true. But don't think that stops, that's where the war stops. The war that starts in the spirit, the war that is ultimately waged in the spirit, it works itself out in flesh and blood every day. And when you look at child pornography, when you look at genocide, when you look at mustard gas, when you look at all the things around us, and that's just up here, the obvious ones. But you also look at all the divorce, all the betrayal, all the wretchedness that goes in our daily lives. That's where the spiritual fight up here, as the Bible says, what is born in the spirit eventually gives birth to death. So all of these things matter, not in some wooey, like misty-wisty world. They matter right now, here and now. And that's why this battle is so important, that we all learn to pick up our swords and fight this thing off, because that's ultimately where it talks about the devil, is like, how do you resist the devil? You submit yourself to God, you resist what he's going to give you, and that he will flee. It's super clean. I don't want to pretend it's easy, but it's clean. And that's how we win. That's how the kingdom of God comes to earth. And we don't continue to work in this problem where he's fighting us. Now here's why for us this is so important, is that ultimately all of this spiritual warfare is a battle for your heart, your individual heart, your story, your life. Because the enemy, when you're born, he knows who you were made to be. It's often a mystery to us. What is our design? Like, what were we made for? How did God bring us into this world? You're different, Durkee, than Gavin. Every one of us is different. We all have a design. And if you imagine you walk into the hardware store, it's really clear to you, that's a hammer, that's a wrench, that's a screwdriver. Like, to you, it's super clear, but to the wrench, it's not. Like, I don't know what I'm made for. And that's often the way that the enemy can see us. He can look right at you, Sammy, and he can see the fingerprint of God on your forehead, and he knows what you were made to do, and he is afraid of you. He's afraid of what you could accomplish, because we have not thousands, we have hundreds of stories throughout the Bible of one person who changed the world. Every one of you has that imprint on your forehead. He's terrified of what you could become. But he also knows that it's a mystery to you, that often our calling and our purpose is a mystery. He knows that. And so what he wants to do is he wants to cut that strength out from under you the moment he can, before you ever find your feet, before you ever find your design, and before you're able to stand up and wield that sword. That is his first purpose of your first wound. Take out that strength, or get you to resent it even better. If your strength, if your glory is towards, pick something, is towards leadership, for him to get you to resent that about your life is even better than killing it. Lewis says in the Space Trilogy that a crooked man is even worse than a dead man. That someone who has turned their gifts towards the evil one. Because remember, these weapons are still real, whether you use them or misuse them. That's even better. He would love for you to switch sides. And that's what this is about. I'm going to do one last little bit here about the enemy, and then I'm going to wrap up this story. And this is just something to predict with regard to the devil in particular. And this is a common pattern of how he's going to come at you. The first thing the devil's going to want to do is tell you he's not there. The first thing is, I pretend he's not there. This isn't me. This is you. That's your problem. It's your wife's problem. It's your husband's problem. It's your boss's problem. It's Trump. It's COVID. It's whatever. It's blame shifting everybody but him. And he will take every problem you have and he will move he'll shift the blame anywhere else until the moment you realize, wait a second, where's all this coming from? All this like division and hatred and animosity that's been going on in politics, that's not your friends. And it's not you. That is exactly the fruit of the evil one. Any one of those conversations you have within yourself, just to not let it get to you and to come back with love. But the enemy would love to blame your buddies, would love to blame their politics, their voting, whatever else. He wants to blame everything on somebody else. That's his first plan, is to hide. And I would point out, in this world, he's an opportunist. He just looks for those places where he can pick at you, and a little bit goes a long way. So long as you're blind, it doesn't matter. If he can just keep you tripped up and off balance, that's all it takes. And so like, he'll be an opportunist to just ding your glory, ding your duty, ding your calling. He'll just hit you at that because you haven't found that he's even in the room yet. And he would love to destroy communication. Communication in any war story is one of the very first things you try to get to. Can I get the soldiers to not talk to command? And in the end, on a battlefield, command just knows stuff that the soldiers don't. Like, I know where the enemy is. I know what he's doing. I know what the big picture is. So if the devil can break your communication with God for sure, but also with your friends, with your spouse, with your family, if he can break that communication with your ministry and isolate you, your efficacy has gone down literally 100 times. Remember the story, like one will set to flight 1,000, two will set to flight 10,000. This is a biblical verse. Like, in unity, our power over the enemy is multiplied by an order of magnitude. So when he can isolate you, he has diminished you by an order of magnitude. It's math. He also loves to sow confusion. He loves to get us fighting with each other. That's always a joy. And he loves to mess with propaganda that assaults your identity. He loves to tell you who you are. We love to say that God has a plan for your life. You ever think that the devil has a plan for your life? You ever think that he also has a place that he'd love you to be? That he'd be working towards that end, is to hijack God's purpose in your life and make it his own? So there's that. The defense to that thing is wake up. Like, just read the Bible and realize how often this is, and then look for him. Look for those places where those thoughts, like, that's a lie. Like, you get to where you sense that thing that was just told, it's a lie, and you have nothing to do with it. You reject it. This is a spiritual stronghold. I take every thought captive to Christ. You learn how to say no. You learn how to say no in your heart to everything he's offering you, everything he's tempting with you with. And then you learn how to, like, exert the authority that you've been given. Push him out, evict him, get out. Like, and I would suggest that you say this out loud. It's worth it, because from all spiritual warfare is essentially a battle of wills. And it's not that the devil needs to hear your vocal voice. It's that you need to exert your own will. And we are fleshly creatures. When I shout, that is partly of how I exert my will. Quite frankly, it's hard for me to muster that same level of will just in my own head. Now, it's not always appropriate. So I can use that with wisdom, but don't ever be afraid to just speak out loud. I do it all the time. I pray in my house all the time and out loud, and it focuses your will. And then defend your heart like it's a castle, which is to say, like, you don't just let anybody in the door. You need to be shrewd. You need to be wise. And even people who are your friends and stuff, like, your castle, you have to understand, like, how important it is. This is the wellspring of your life. So you defend your heart like a castle. Stage number 2 for the enemy is usually intimidation. Once he knows that you're on to him, now he's going to be like a cat. He's going to get himself really big and try to pretend that he's way more buff and way more awesome than he is. And he wants to scare you. He's going to threaten. You're going to have the thoughts that's like, I'm going to kill your kids. I'm going to take away your job. Like whatever it is, he's going to threaten you. And just be ready for that. The thing is, he's a liar. Now, I don't want to make the mistake to say, like, the devil's powerless. He's not. The thing is, like, he's not the king. And it's like, he who is in us is greater than he who's in the world. Like, your bodyguard, your friend, your buddy, your king, Jesus, like, makes Lucifer look like nothing. So I don't want to pretend that he's a paper tiger. He's not, but you're on the right side. And so you lean into that. So, like, he's threatening you, bring it to daddy. Like, bring that, and then don't let him intimidate you. But I would point out that when Jesus sends out the 70, He doesn't call the 70 to a life of comfort. He calls them to a bigger picture. You're not going to bring any money. You can expect to be like wolves or like lambs among the wolves. People are going to beat you up for my name. I hope you get used to that. And isn't this awesome? Right? This is the call, and it's the same call. So when the devil intimidates you, what the Bible shows is count that as glory. Count that as blessing. Count this that you've been, that what it says is that we have been honored to be brought into the battle. That have been blessed to be called and to suffer with Christ. That's still the call. Like, we are never, ever offered safety, comfort. That's not the picture, because that's not the phase that we're in. We're in the battle, okay? Don't be afraid. God is with us. Stage 3 for the enemy is usually cutting a deal. If he knows that you won't get into being threatened and intimidated, usually he's going to cut a deal with you. Like, it's something like, if you back down, I'll back down. Like, all right, like I get it. I'll give up a little bit of ground, but just stop here. It's compromise. It's like, you've gone far enough. You've done enough. You've suffered enough. You've paid enough. You've done your dues. It's the compromise and the deal making that also just wants you to not follow through. And so here's the picture that we see this in the Bible. One of them is a king who wants to fight. I don't remember. They're always fighting somebody. And the prophet Elisha comes to him and says, like, as a sign of this, I need you to strike the arrows on the ground. And the king's like, and obviously I'm imagining the king's like, you mean I don't like this? Whack, whack, whack. He kind of just like, I have to imagine he has no idea what's going on. And Elisha lays into him, and he's like, you half-assed son of a bitch. You should have like whacked the ground harder and 5 times. And if you would have, this battle would have been over. But because you slacked on this, because you didn't follow through, now you're going to have a victory that's going to be gone in 3 years. Like, this could have been so much better, but your lack of follow through now changed history for the worse. This idea, this is where the devil would love for you to just pull back. Now, one of the best things that he will use for you in this thing is he will use your good heart against you, because it's your good heart that seeks peace. It's your good heart that loves mercy and justice. And I think it's fair to say, like, I don't want to keep fighting. And so if there's an opportunity to feel like I can take a break here finally, like, it's your good heart that wants these things. It's just that he's using it against you. So follow through is the thing that finishes this job, because you know that no spiritual thing ever dies. It just gets suppressed. And so that's what you'll see often with the enemy. Now, last just kind of wrap up my thing is I want to point out that sometimes this message can be inspiring. Sometimes it can be invigorating. Sometimes it can just be a drag. Like, I don't want to fight. But in heaven, you can count just like what Henry V says in the St. Crispin's Day speech, if you've seen like one of the best Shakespeare ever done. It's like, there's going to be the day in heaven when you roll up your sleeves and everyone is showing their wounds. Everyone's going to show the scars that they took on this battlefield. And these are going to be the scars of honor. These are going to be scars that say, like, I stood up for the kingdom and this is what it cost me. And I would point out, like, the first best honor scars are in Christ himself. Remember when he says, like, hey, Thomas, like, you don't believe me? Right here in my side, like, this scar was not healed in his resurrection. These scars in his hands and his feet, these last for eternity. Those scars are part of your honor wounds too. And it's going to be a powerful moment. And I would point out, like, you don't want to come to that table unscarred. You don't want to come to that table because everyone knows that you didn't pick up your sword, that you drove your car into the ditch. Now that should be, I don't say that to make you shameful. I say it to encourage you. Like, this is a point of honor and of glory for all of us, for all of eternity. This is what you have been invited into, not dumped on. It's a powerful, powerful moment for all of your life. That's what I have for this clip. Dirk, if you want to stop the recording. I guess